You wanted them new KFC wings, and you got them, right?
Yeah.
I'm weeping. I'm weeping because the kid, she didn't have the kids. She didn't have to do it. Whoever was down there was picking these kids up and they was crying. And one kid said, "Mommy, no, mommy, no, mommy."
Some of the details you're about to hear are disturbing.
In August 2021, Jamiria Hall's 6-year-old daughter, Denaria, and 8-year-old son, Davin Jr., were found decomposing inside their southwest Baltimore apartment. But what makes this case particularly chilling is what happened just 2 years before their deaths. After serving jail time for setting her parents' apartment on fire with these same children inside, Jamiria walked into a courtroom and was granted custody of Denaria and Davin because their father didn't show up to the hearing. 2 years later, neighbors would hear Denaria's final screams echoing through their apartment building.
And I heard a little boy through the floor was kind of crying. And right after that, I didn't hear anything else.
But before we get to that horrifying night in August, let me take you back to where this tragedy really began. Jamiria Renee Hall was born on September 11, 1992 in Baltimore, Maryland. Growing up in the city, but not much is publicly known about her early life or childhood. She would eventually become a mother to 2 children, Denaria Thomas, born around 2015, and her older child, Davin Thomas Jr., born around 2013.
Little kindergartner. Hi, girl. Hi, second grader. Hi.
Both children shared the same father, Davin Thomas Sr., though his involvement in their lives proved to be limited at best. On the surface, Jamiria seemed like a devoted mother. She frequently posted about her children on social media, sharing photos and expressing her desire to do better for them.
And I have 2 little mini-me's tonight. This evening I have
Denaria Thomas Joy.
And I have
Devin Thomas.
Y'all been driving me crazy. But I love y'all.
I too.
Okay?
Okay.
A former classmate named Chantel Carnachin described Hall as someone who always prioritized your children.
Amira, she just always, her kids were her top priority. She always wanted to do better for them. She went to school for them,
Often sharing her aspirations to improve their lives.
You wanted them new KFC wings, and you got them, right?
Yeah.
Then you come back to the house to say you hungry again.
We have buffalo wings.
So what did we go to America's Best and get?
Neighbors in their southwest Baltimore apartment complex would regularly see the children playing happily outside, riding their bikes, appearing well cared for right up until mid-August 2021. But beneath this facade of maternal devotion, something far more troubling was brewing. Jamiria had been struggling with her mental health for years, though the full extent of her illness wouldn't be properly diagnosed until after the unthinkable happened. She even hosted a podcast called Be More Charming, where she openly discussed her mental health struggles. On her show, she talked about how stress triggered her depression, explaining in her own words how my anger develops my anxiety develops my stress triggers my depression. The first major red flag came on October 2018. Jamiria was staying at her parents' apartment with her then 3-year-old daughter and 5-year-old son. What happened next would be a clear warning sign of the danger to come.
According to 2018 charging documents, Hall set her mother's apartment on fire with the children inside. Those documents say that Hall was removing smoke detectors and destroying some of them, and then she lit photographs and other items on fire around the apartment.
Court documents reveal the disturbing details of that night. Jamiria deliberately disabled all the smoke detectors in the apartment, placed family photos in a frying pan on the stove, and ignited the burners. She turned the gas oven to its highest setting. The investigators found what they described as a makeshift shrine or altar of additional photos arranged on a sofa. With her young children sleeping inside, she locked the doors and fled with them, later appearing at a local hospital where they were found unharmed. She pleaded guilty to first-degree arson and child endangerment, receiving a 5-year sentence with all but 1 year suspended, plus probation.
There was a search for Hall and the children in October of 2018, when, according to charging documents, Hall pled guilty to arson after she set fire to a frying pan with family photos in it and disabled smoke detectors while staying at her mother's house. Hall and the children were eventually found uninjured at a hospital.
Jamaria would later reflect on this incident as her mental breakdown, linking it to cascading stress and depression. But here's where the system failed these children in a profound way. While Jamaria served her 1-year jail sentence, the children went to live with their paternal grandparents. Theodore Thomas and his wife temporarily took care of Denaria and Davin. They thought the children would be safe with them, but then something shocking happened. A child welfare agency, likely Maryland's Department of Human Services or Child Protective Services, made a decision that would prove fatal. They removed the children from the grandparents' home and returned them to Jamaria Hall.
I took these concerns up with an attorney about how that could possibly happen, how she could regain custody after all of that and given her documented past.
Theodore Thomas would later express his frustration, stating that they gave his grandchildren back to their mother after she literally set a house on fire with them inside. In 2019, months after her release from jail, Jamaria petitioned for custody in Baltimore City Circuit Court. The children's father, Davin Thomas Sr., who had been intermittently involved in their lives, failed to respond to the court proceedings or appear at the hearing. With no opposition and apparently limited consideration of the 2018 arson incident, the court granted Jamaria primary custody of both children. The system that should have protected Denaria and Davin had just handed them back to someone who had already endangered their lives once before. Over the next 2 years, from 2019 to 2021, reports would later surface of disturbing behavior toward the children, though these reports contrast sharply with how neighbors and acquaintances perceived the family.
They were like a trio. If you saw her, you saw them.
The family's neighbor, who remained anonymous, described how her own daughter and Denaria were best friends who would play together in the hallway every day.
Denaria and my daughter would play in the hallway. I have no clue how I'm going to explain this to my baby.
But behind closed doors, Jamaria's mental health was deteriorating. She had been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, a severe mental illness characterized by delusions, hallucinations, and mood disturbances. This condition, when left untreated, can lead to psychotic breaks where a person loses touch with reality. And that's exactly what was about to happen, because evidence found at the crime scene included a court letter about ongoing custody issues, suggesting that family tensions and disputes had persisted or resurfaced, adding even more stress to Jamaria's already fragile mental state. In the weeks leading up to August 2021, Jamaria Hall stopped taking her prescribed psychiatric medications. Without medication to manage her schizoaffective disorder, the delusions and hallucinations began to intensify. About 1 week before the killings, Jamaria confided in her brother that she believed she was fighting evil spirits to protect herself and her children. This wasn't just unusual behavior. This was a clear sign that she was experiencing a severe psychotic break. Her boyfriend at the time reported increasingly bizarre and frightening behavior. Jamaria ordered him into a car trunk and drove erratically. She also locked him in a storage unit and told him that her family was plotting to kill her. These weren't the actions of someone who was thinking clearly. These were the actions of someone whose grip on reality was slipping away entirely. Jamaria believed that her relatives had cast spells on Denaria and Davin. In her distorted reality, when she looked at her children, she didn't see them as they really were. The hallucinations made her perceive them as other people entirely. She attempted to break the spell by cutting their hair and placing it in a pan on the stove. This detail is particularly chilling because it shows how disconnected from reality she had become. In her mind, she wasn't planning to hurt her children. She thought she was trying to save them. But the children themselves seemed happy in the days leading up to the tragedy. Neighbors reported seeing them playing normally outside as late as August 19th. There were no obvious outward signs to anyone observing from the outside that anything was terribly wrong.
He noticed the car disappeared a few weeks back and saw the kids sitting by a stump by themselves.
I just seen the kids, so I kind of like got a little personal with them. Hey, how you guys doing? I don't see your family out here no more. Normally you guys are in the car. And they just kind of like looked at me like they didn't look happy at all.
However, one neighbor named Brandon Dixon found this suspicious at the time. He had gotten to know the children and noticed they seemed unhappy in the weeks before their deaths. He tried talking to them, asking where their family was, but the children just looked at him without speaking. August 19th, 2021 started like any other summer evening in southwest Baltimore. But as darkness fell over the apartment complex at 531 Coventry Road, something horrific began to unfold inside apartment number 1. Neighbors reported hearing distressing screams that night. Cries of "Mommy, no!" echoed through the building. Those screams, investigators believe, came from 6-year-old Denaria in her final moments, and they would be the last sounds anyone heard from either of the Thomas children alive.
I heard the kids around 11:30.
He says screams of and tussling that night seeped through his floor from the apartment below.
Whoever was down there was picking these kids up and they was crying. And one kid said, "Mommy, no, Mommy, no, Mommy." And I heard a little boy through the floor was kind of crying. And right after that, I didn't hear anything else.
What happened inside that apartment over the next hours would be described by prosecutors as one of the most horrific cases they had ever encountered. Jamaria drowned and strangled Denaria in the bathtub. Davin Jr. suffered a different but equally brutal death. Jamaria stabbed him in the chest with a knife. After killing both children, Jamaria placed Davin's body face down in the living room inside a sleeping bag. She embedded the knife in his chest and covered his head with a trash bag. She left Denaria's body in the bathtub with clothing wrapped tightly around her neck. Then Jamaria did something that showed she understood on some level what she had done. Over the next few days, neighbors observed her discarding large items from the apartment, including the children's beds and other bedroom furniture. Investigators also found that Jamaria left a stove burner on in the apartment, possibly in an attempt to start a fire that would destroy the evidence of what she had done. But unlike the successful arson in 2018, this time the apartment didn't catch fire. The bodies remained inside, beginning to decompose in the summer heat, and on August 23rd, Jamaria's mother contacted authorities with a troubling report. Jamaria had told her she was in the hospital and that the children were with their father. On August 24th, 2021, the horrifying truth was finally discovered. A maintenance worker at the Coventry Manor Apartments responded to complaints from neighbors about a foul odor coming from apartment number 1. When he entered the unit at approximately 4:51 in the afternoon, he made a gruesome discovery that would shake the entire community. Inside the apartment, he found the decomposing bodies of Denaria Thomas and Davin Thomas Jr. The scene was so horrific that a professional cleaning crew had to be hired later to sanitize the apartment. The children had been dead for approximately 5 days, and the state of decomposition was advanced enough that it was immediately clear they had died days earlier, likely on or around August 19th, when neighbors heard those terrible screams. Police were called immediately. When officers arrived and confirmed what the maintenance worker had found, a massive investigation began.
Well, Andre, police confirm the bodies found were those of a boy and a girl. Both were in a state of decomposition and had visible trauma to their bodies, confirming what neighbors already suspected.
I just cried. It's very heartbreaking.
A knock on the door at Tony Hyman's apartment Tuesday afternoon brought her devastating news.
The police came to my apartment and pretty much told me that 2 children were found unresponsive in the building next door. I literally just saw them. They just asked about my daughter when she was coming back, and they seemed fine.
Tody says her 9-year-old daughter plays with the boy and girl who are around the same age. She says they lived in the apartment on Coventry Road with their mother.
Very friendly, very respectful. You know, they yes ma'am, no ma'am, may I, can I, you know, they're very respectful. She definitely raised two very calm, respectable children. They play in the grass and my daughter thinks they're just fun to be around.
Police confirmed 2 people were found deceased in a home in the building, but have not released their ages or genders. Homicide detectives were on the scene into the evening Tuesday.
It's really troublesome to know that something is going on like that. I mean, we don't get this kind of drama in this neighborhood.
Neighbors say this Southwest Baltimore neighborhood is usually quiet and safe, but they watched the crime scene tape rolled out and knew something bad had happened.
I just hope that everything will be uncovered and somebody will get some answers to this. I wouldn't want to see anybody's family go through this at all. No one's family.
Neighbors and friends wait for answers as well as police continue their investigation into what happened inside that apartment.
And it's easy to dismiss it when you don't know these people, but when you actually know these children, you spend time with these children, it's very heartbreaking, it's very shocking.
I just feel sorry. My heart goes out to whoever it is, you know. So we just keep them lifted up in prayer. That's all we can do.
But where was Jamaria Hall? She wasn't in the apartment when the bodies were discovered. In fact, she had been moving around Baltimore in the days since the killings. On that same day, August 24th, the children's father, David Thomas Sr., had a disturbing encounter with Jamaria. He spotted her wandering erratically near North Avenue and Bloomingdale Road. She was screaming and cursing at no one, appearing to be under the influence of something. The next day, August 25, 2021, the Regional Auto Theft Task Force located Jamaria. She was riding in an Uber in Baltimore County. Officers brought her to the Baltimore City Police Department's homicide unit for questioning. What happened in that interview room would eliminate any doubt about who killed Denaria and Davin. Jamaria waived her Miranda rights, the rights to remain silent until her lawyer shows up, and provided a detailed confession to homicide detectives. She described exactly how she killed each child and explained her methods in chilling detail. Jamaria was immediately charged with 2 counts each of first-degree murder, first-degree assault, and reckless endangerment, and was held without bond.
Everyone, I'm Vic Carter. And I'm Max McGee. Welcome to WJZ News of 4 and those of you streaming on CBSN Baltimore. The Baltimore woman accused of killing her 2 young children to stand trial. Jamaria Hall was charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of her 8-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter. They were found dead inside their Southwest Baltimore apartment last month.
Baltimore Police Commissioner Michael Harrison announced that the department would review Hall's child custody history as part of their investigation.
We can confirm now that the mother, 28-year-old Jamaria Hall, is the suspect in this case, having confessed to murdering her children. She is currently in our custody, and detectives will be pursuing criminal charges. We're still reviewing surveillance video, combing through calls for service, and speaking with residents and gathering any additional details around this heartbreaking incident.
The obvious question everyone was asking was how this woman had been allowed to keep custody of these children after the 2018 arson incident. But the legal proceedings that followed would take a dramatically different turn than most murder cases. This meant she could not understand the charges against her or assist in her own defense, and her case was placed on the inactive docket while she received treatment.
Hall's case has been placed on the inactive docket until she is found mentally fit to stand trial.
By March 2022, after months of psychiatric treatment at Clifton T. Perkins Hospital Center, Jamaria's competency was restored. She could now understand the legal proceedings and participate in her defense, but prosecutors and defense attorneys still had to grapple with the central question of the case. Was Jamaria Hall criminally responsible for these murders, or was she so mentally ill at the time that she couldn't appreciate what she was doing? The battle over this question would involve multiple psychiatric evaluations. Initial state forensic psychiatrists concluded that Jamaria was sane and criminally responsible. They pointed to evidence that suggested premeditation and cover-up, like leaving the stove burner on to potentially burn the apartment, her appearance of intoxication to neighbors, and what they characterized as pent-up anger toward the children's father and her mother. The state doctors even dismissed her reports of hallucinations as malingering, suggesting she was faking mental illness. But prosecutor Tracy Varda wasn't convinced by the state's evaluation. In what Judge Gail E. Rosen would later describe as an extraordinary investigation, Varda conducted her own deep dive into the evidence. She reviewed police interviews, hospital records, detention logs, recorded jail phone calls, and Jamaria's social media posts. What she found painted a very different picture. The jail calls revealed a woman who was genuinely confused about her own actions. Jamaria expressed anxiety and depression. She talked about hearing voices that commanded her and that she didn't understand why she had hurt her children. Varda hired an independent psychiatric expert to review all of this evidence, who also came to a conclusion that aligned with the defense psychiatrists. Jamaria Hall had been experiencing a severe psychotic break caused by her untreated schizoaffective disorder at the time she killed her children. She genuinely believed she was protecting them from evil spirits and spells. When she looked at Jamaria and Davin, her hallucinations made her see different people entirely. Her actions, while horrific, were the direct result of a diseased mind, not criminal intent. On April 17, 2024, nearly 3 years after the deaths of her children, Jamaria Hall appeared via Zoom in Baltimore City Circuit Court. She was now 31 years old. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of first-degree child abuse resulting in death, but she also entered a plea of not criminally responsible due to her mental illness. Retired Judge Gail E. Rosen, who oversaw the mental health court, accepted this plea. In her ruling, Judge Rosen was critical of the state's initial psychiatric evaluation, noting that the doctors had selectively emphasized certain facts while ignoring treatment records and observations from Jamaria's treatment team. The judge found that Jamaria lacked the substantial capacity to appreciate the criminality of her conduct and conform her conduct to the requirements of the law at the time she killed her children. This finding meant that Jamaria would not go to prison. Instead, she was committed indefinitely to the Maryland Department of Health for treatment at a maximum security psychiatric facility. She would remain there until mental health professionals and the court determined she is no longer a danger to herself or others. There is no fixed release date. She could potentially be confined for the rest of her life, or she could be released if her condition improves and she is deemed safe. Any potential release would come with strict conditions, including mandatory medication, ongoing psychiatric care, participation in treatment programs, and absolute prohibition of drugs and alcohol. This case raises profound questions about how our systems handle mental illness, particularly when children are involved.
I think many people failed these children.
Adam Rosenberg is the Vice President of Violence Intervention and Prevention at Lifebridge Health Center for Hope. He says it's easy to blame one department of government, but in reality, as a community, we failed the children.
The latest police reports are indicating that the children were heard screaming, "Mommy, help!" And did anybody call 911? Did anybody go over to that house, knock on the door and say, "Can I help you? Is something going wrong here?" There were children who were at risk, and that we're not seeing something and saying something. We're saying things after the fact, but we're not saying something during the fact. And we need to put ourselves out there a little bit. And look, people are afraid of conflict, and I think they're afraid of what's going to happen if I knock on that door, if I intercede with that there. But the converse is, there could be a crowd who ends up dead if we don't get involved. These kids wouldn't have been on anybody's radar to begin with there, and so it's not a failure of the system because the system doesn't really look for things like that. We can pivot towards that, and maybe we need the resources to do that, but that's not classic child protection work.
A similar case occurred in Minnesota in 2022 when Julissa Thaler killed her 6-year-old son Eli Hart just 10 days after regaining custody. Like Jamaria, Thaler had extensive mental health problems and a history that should have raised red flags. Unlike Jamaria, Thaler was found competent and convicted of first-degree murder, receiving life without parole.
Eli Hart's murder in May of last year shocked and saddened people across the metro. Today, his mother was sentenced to life in prison for killing him. Julissa Thaler will serve her sentence without any opportunity for parole.
Laura Goose was in court today for emotional impact statements and Thaler's indignant response.
At the sentencing hearing for convicted killer mom Julissa Thaler, Judge Jay Quam heard victim impact statements.
As I read the article, I had a gut feeling it was Eli that was found dead.
Including from Nikita Kronberg, a relative who fostered 6-year-old Eli Hart, providing him a loving home before the courts returned Eli to the custody of Thaler, his mother, who a jury convicted of first-degree murder for killing Eli in her car with a shotgun.
To this day, I blame myself for not saving Eli. Should I have kept in contact with this monster after Eli was returned for the home trial?
It wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault at all. So the sooner you can let go of that, the sooner you can appreciate all the time that you did have.
Then Eli's dad, Torrey Hart, stood next to his wife, Josephine Josephson, who read their joint statement.
You could see the love and bond they shared every second they were together. They had this extra spark between them that everyone could see. Now we only have memories. And they're not enough.
When given the chance to speak, Thaler did not apologize. Instead, she claimed she's innocent and cussed out the judge and everyone in the courtroom.
You're garbage.
Even Thaler's attorney cringing.
It doesn't surprise me, is all I can say.
Eli's family is now turning the attention to a playground they're raising money to build at Surfside Beach and Mound in Eli's name.
In honor of all children that should have a happy childhood.
And as Thaler begins to serve her life sentence, a lawsuit looms against Dakota County Social Services for putting Eli in Thaler's hands, despite countless red flags.
The different outcomes in these similar cases highlight how inconsistently our legal system handles mental illness. In Jamaria's case, multiple points of potential intervention were missed. After the 2018 arson where she endangered her children, why wasn't there more robust monitoring by Child Protective Services? When she regained custody in 2019, why didn't the court require ongoing mental health treatment as a condition? When the father didn't show up to the custody hearing, why didn't that trigger additional scrutiny rather than simply handing the children back to someone who had already endangered them? Theodore Thomas, the children's paternal grandfather, captured the frustration many feel about this case. They gave his grandchildren back to their mother after she set a house on fire with them inside. The system designed to protect vulnerable children failed Denaria and Davin in the most catastrophic way possible. 2 innocent lives were lost because warning signs were ignored. Mental illness went untreated, and bureaucratic decisions prioritized reunification over safety. The neighbor who spoke those words about explaining to her daughter that her best friend Denaria was gone speaks for a community left traumatized by preventable tragedy.
The family's neighbor wonders how she'll tell her daughter that her best friend is gone.
I have no clue how I'm going to explain this to my baby. Because she played with them every day.
6-year-old Denaria and 8-year-old Davin Thomas Jr. deserved better. They deserved a system that protected them. They deserved treatment for their mother's illness before it reached a deadly breaking point. They deserved to grow up, to have futures, to become more than victims in a cautionary tale about systemic failure. What do you think about this case? Do you think the father of the kids should also be held liable? Let me know in the comments section. Also, click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this. See you in the next one.